New Brunswickers all over the province are struggling with the cost of living. And we made a promise to make life more affordable for New Brunswickers. Partout autour de la province, les Néo-Brunswickois ont de la difficulté à joindre les deux bouts. Et nous autres, lorsque nous avons formé le gouvernement, nous avons pris un engagement clair de rendre la vie plus abordable pour les Néo-Brunswickois. We made a clear commitment to remove the cost of carbon adjuster to provide real relief at the gas pumps. We are announcing today that we're delivering on that promise, effective December 1st. This will save you money at the pumps, around 8 cents a litre today. It could result in savings of $150 to $200 for a typical New Brunswick household that fills up once a week. Maintenant, nous tenons cette promesse à compter du 1er décembre d'enlever le coût de la carbone. Cela vous ferait économiser à la pompe et ça résultera des économies d'environ 150 $200 pour un ménage typique du Nouveau-Brunswick qui fait le plein une fois par semaine. Removing the cost of carbon adjuster ensures that hardworking New Brunswick families aren't unfairly carrying the burden of the federal government's clean fuel regulations. At a time when many families are feeling the strain, this move puts people first. Because for us, our focus is and always will be making life better for New Brunswickers. À un moment où de nombreuses familles ressentent la pression de la hausse du coût de la vie, cette étape met les gens en premier. Parce que notre priorité aujourd'hui, comme toujours, c'est d'améliorer la vie pour les Néo-Brunswickois. Merci.
Bon après-midi. Good afternoon, everyone. As the Premier has indicated, the removal of the cost of carbon adjuster on December 1st delivers on a commitment to make life more affordable for New Brunswickers. Government has taken a responsible, measured approach, and we are acting only after thorough review and consultation to ensure the stability of fuel supply and fairness for consumers. We have listened to and considered input from retailers, wholesalers, NGOs, and the public intervener through both the Law Amendments Committee and Energy and Utilities Board processes. Ultimately, our plan balances consumer affordability with market stability. The purpose of delaying the implementation date is to allow time for the sector to prepare. We have heard that there are concerns from the fuel sector, but I want to stress that the Energy and Utilities Board has the tools and ability to consider legitimate cost pressures and make fair, evidence-based adjustments through its established and transparent process. Thank you, merci.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today. New Brunswick is one of the few provinces that regulate gasoline prices. The role of the EUB is an important one, as it was established as an independent quasi-judicial tribunal established by the legislature to regulate the electricity, natural gas, pipeline, motor carrier industries, and set maximum gasoline prices for the province. We have heard from New Brunswickers how the formula can be confusing, that they don't understand it, and it is too complex. As a former longtime member of the EUB, I understand the complexities of regulation, of how the EUB operates. Our government is committed to transparency and helping New Brunswickers know what they are paying at the pumps, and more importantly, why. We have been clear. The Higgs carbon tax adjuster circumvents regulatory practice where sector participants must prove their costs, rather than having the regulator to do their work for them to prove their costs to this federal clean fuel regulation. We are confident that the EUB has the tools to protect consumers while also meeting the needs of wholesalers, retailers, and industry. This announcement shows that our government is listening to the concerns of New Brunswickers and acting on them as we have continuously stated. Thank you.
Thank you to all podium speakers. Je tiens à remercier tous nos invités. We'll now proceed with questions from members of the media. Each reporter will have one question and the quickest follow-up. You have the right to pose your question in the official language of your choice. Just to let you know, given the amount of time we have for this availability, we'll start off with questions specifically pertaining to today's announcement. Nous allons maintenant procéder aux questions des journalistes. Chaque journaliste a un droit à une question et un suivi très, très rapide. Vous avez le droit de poser vos questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Et pour notre information, compte tenu du temps que nous avons pour ce point de presse, nous allons commencer par les questions concernant cette annonce. Jacques Poitras, CBC.
Thank you. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the margins that the EUB has approved so far would not match the amount that the carbon adjuster would take away from retailers. Is it enough to mitigate or offset the cost being downloaded to retailers? And what are the tools that the EUB has to further deal with that issue? What exactly are you looking for them to do?
I guess a couple points that were raised there that we are uncertain whether it covers the cost of compliance to the clean fuel regulation. So the carbon adjuster is set on a relatively esoteric formula. We don't know what those true costs are. Clearly, having the increased margin that was approved a couple of weeks ago does do exactly the word that you used. It does mitigate that type of concern, and it provides the opportunity for the EUB to do what they should do in the first place, and that is to for any cost of compliance should be based on real costs, to hold an appropriate hearing for the sector to come in and prove what those costs are. The original statute was wrong. It was circumvented normal regulatory practice. If there was a cost of compliance, the sector needed to come forward to prove what those costs are. I'm going to suggest that the previous government, by keeping it out there and calling it a carbon tax type of adjuster, was done for political purposes. Instead, standard regulatory practice is if there's a cost of your operations, you need to prove that to the regulator.
Secondly, last fall, Premier Holt and Minister Herron both seemed very intrigued with the idea of getting rid of price regulation altogether. What's your thinking on that as of today?
So
It's still something we're looking at, to put it briefly.
Thank you very much. We'll now go online. Adam Harris, Post Media.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for letting us ask some questions here. I just wanted to know, do you not believe gas retailers when they say this squeezes their margins and could force them to close? Is that why you're saying go to the EUB and prove it?
No, I think what we want is for New Brunswickers to pay the lowest possible price, and we want to have a stability of supply, but we need to do that with transparency and certainty. As the minister has described, there's a lot of confusion with an old proxy formula. We want folks to provide information so that we can make sure that we are not overcharging New Brunswickers for gas, because people are looking for relief. And this government is interested in doing everything we can to help make life more affordable for New Brunswickers. And so there is a process that the EUB can go through. The retailers and others can provide their costs, as can the industry, and it is their job to make sure we have the most competitive fuel prices with a stable supply. We want to make sure that New Brunswickers are getting the best possible and the lowest possible price for gas.
Mr. Harris, a follow-up?
Thanks, Bruce. Industry calls this a purely political announcement, and that there's no data, that shows that this carbon adjuster shouldn't be in place. How do you answer that?
Well, this is an announcement that it is politics in the sense that we are delivering on our promise. We committed this to New Brunswickers, and as I said, we are doing everything we can to provide them relief in a really challenging economy right now. And so we think, to your point there, Adam, that it makes sense for folks to have to provide data, to provide the data of what the actual costs of compliance are, because that data is lacking in the system right now. And having that can reassure us and New Brunswickers that they aren't paying a penny more than they need to for gas.
Thank you. Laura Brown, CTV.
I guess I'm interested if is this an ongoing? Can they provide that data on an ongoing basis, or is this open ended for them to be able to provide that evidence?
That's a you question.
Sure. So it is an ongoing process. Is that every year or every time they have a hearing on a petroleum margin hearing, is that it's incumbent on the applicant, the sector, to prove its cost of operations, whether that's a federal regulation in this case, or even credit card charges or transportation charges itself. That's how regulation works, is that regardless if it's motor carrier, electricity, or the like, you need to prove what your costs are. The onus is always on the applicant. They prove those costs, and then the regulator then sets a fair and reasonable profit margin. In this case, the original piece of legislation circumvented normal regulatory practice. It actually called upon the EUB to identify what those costs are. And they chose to do so at that time, in a very truncated period of time, to use a formula. It was supposed to be a short-term proxy, something that would need to be reviewed at a maximum of 6 months, if not sooner, if you read the original decision. I know the original decision because I was actually on that panel. And you will see in 3 different circumstances about to review at the earliest possible time that it was a temporary initiative. We're now into 3 years. That doesn't feel very temporary, and it should go back to a standard regulatory practice where the sector comes in and proves what those costs are every time.
And I guess you had alluded to it earlier, but walk us through the delay for this promise to be made. What might have caused that delay?
Well, our government has always been open to using the democratic processes that exist. We brought it to the legislature. There was a process to go through committee. There was a request to have people to be heard at committee. And we learned at committee that there hadn't been a rate hearing in a long time. And so we were able to compel the EUB to hold that rate hearing, to consider margins, and go through that process to get the bill passed, and then listen to industry, meet with industry, understand their concerns, give them time, give them notice to be able to prepare and to be able to adjust and react. And so now we feel like we have done all of that due diligence. Everyone has had a real long heads up on this, that this is coming. But now New Brunswickers are looking for relief, and we're going to deliver it for them.
Alex Villeneuve, Radio-Canada.
Merci. Est-ce que ce que vous annoncez aujourd'hui, vous êtes confiant que ça va vraiment réduire le prix de l'essence au-delà de la première semaine de 8,24 cents? Donc, il n'y aura pas un autre mécanisme ou un autre processus via EUB qui va augmenter d'une autre manière le prix?
Mais ce processus existe toujours. Il y a toujours l'opportunité pour l'industrie de demander aux commissions de regarder les marges et de les considérer. Et le point que le ministre a fait, c'est qu'ils doivent démontrer leurs preuves de c'est quoi les coûts réels. Et la commission va considérer ça et vont faire des ajustements. Ça, c'est leur travail. C'est leur mandat d'assurer qu'on a un approvisionnement stable avec le plus bas prix possible. Alors, on assure qu'ils ont les outils de le faire, mais de façon transparente, claire et ouverte avec les données actuelles sur la table.
Là, une fois que ce processus-là va terminer, est-ce que l'essence va vraiment être de 8,24 cents de moins à la suite?
L'essence va réduire de 8,4 cents le 1er décembre.
Merci beaucoup. Alexandre Boudreau, l'Acadie Nouvelle.
Merci. Une question semblable. Est-ce qu'il n'est pas trop ambitieux, justement, de parler d'une réduction du prix de l'essence de 8 cents? Je veux dire, la Commission a déjà dit que si vous enlevez la majoration, l'industrie va demander pour des nouvelles audiences. Ils vont probablement augmenter leur marge de profit. Ça va faire augmenter le prix de l'essence. ça va probablement pas être une réduction de 8 cents d'ici le 1er décembre. Là.
Je peux juste c'est pas nécessairement une marge de profit, c'est ce qu'ils présentent, c'est leur coût à la commission. Ce qu'on fait aujourd'hui, parce que dans cette décision-là, si vous vous souvenez, lorsqu'ils ont fait le processus pour les marges, ils ont carrément dit qu'ils ne prendraient pas en considération le coût de carbone parce qu'il y a un mécanisme qui existe déjà. Donc, ils ne veulent pas prendre en considération les vrais coûts avant qu'on enlève le mécanisme parce que EUB travaille à l'intérieur des politiques qu'on leur donne. Donc, aujourd'hui, on enlève cette politique qui leur permet maintenant de regarder à l'intérieur des marges les vrais coûts. Parce que là, on a encore un estimé. Le COCA, le coût du carbone qu'on a tout de suite, l'ajusteur, c'est un estimé.
C'est vrai que le prix de l'essence, ça bouge à chaque jour. Nous autres, on fait tout notre possible pour le réduire au prix le plus bas que possible. Alors, ceci, ça va réduire le prix. Il va y avoir une activité qu'ils vont faire pour le regarder. Ça va le monter peut-être, on ne sait pas. Si ça monte, j'espère que ça ne monte pas jusqu'à 8 cents parce que les NIR, c'est quoi, nous demandent et ont besoin d'avoir des réductions dans leurs dépenses pour leur coût de la vie.
Merci. Puis, comme vous l'avez dit, la commission agit dans les balises fixées par le gouvernement. Donc, si l'industrie a raison puis qu'il y a des dépanneurs qui ferment, est-ce que vous allez assumer la responsabilité comme gouvernement? Est-ce que c'est la faute de votre gouvernement ou de la commission?
I think I would suggest that the EUB has a duty, statutory duty, subject to Section 1.1 of the statute itself, is that they have an obligation to ensure that New Brunswickers have access to fuel at the lowest possible price. I'm going to suggest the fact that the sector has not come forth over the last 3 years for an upward adjustment to the carbon adjuster for over 3 years. So I'm going to suggest that it's probable that it's covering the costs, if not even more, they're over-recovering. So that's one portion that the EUB has to do. The second component of it is that still in the same section of the statute, Section 1.1, is that they have to have certainty of continuity of supply. So if the EUB believes that there's a jeopardy with respect to continuity to supply, we believe that the EUB has the tools to act and respond.
Thank you. Natalie Sturgeon, CHCO TV.
I'm wondering, if the industry is to be believed in the context of rural gas stations where, for example, in St. Andrews, there's only one and the nearest gas station from St. Andrews is 30 minutes away. If the industry is to believe that this will place extraordinary pressure on rural gas stations and they might close, how do you explain that to New Brunswickers who then now have to travel 30 minutes to get gas? That's not going to save them any money if they have to travel 30 minutes away.
I appreciate that question, Natalie, because those are the kind of conversations we're having with New Brunswickers right now, everywhere, and that comes back to the point of the previous question. The EUB has a mandate to ensure stability of supply and to ensure the lowest possible price for New Brunswickers. And so we certainly don't want to see folks close or go out of business, and we don't want to see New Brunswickers overpaying for gas. And so we think there's work to be done here. We're upholding our end of the bargain. The EUB and the retailers and the industry have work to do as well, so that New Brunswickers can feel confident that they are getting the best price that they can for gas, which is something that a lot of New Brunswickers need every day.
Ms. Sturgeon, a follow-up?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Mandan, Global TV.
Hi there. Premier, you mentioned that the EUB's price setting will kind of help with these rural gas stations being able to survive. But then Minister Dornan is saying he doesn't know yet whether it will cover all of that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, your Minister Herron is probably the best person to talk about the EUB, but our objective is to make sure that New Brunswickers are paying the lowest price possible for gas. And that's why there is a hearing process that puts the real data of the actual costs to comply and the cost to deliver gas to New Brunswickers, puts them on the table and allows for that consideration so that the EUB can do their job. And so we expect them to do that, and we think that having that actual data at our fingertips will result in something better for New Brunswickers.
If the EUB isn't able to help mitigate that, what are next steps for those small stations?
So in terms of the EUB isn't able, I'm going to suggest that they have the tools to be able to respond. There's a reason why the implementation of this is December 1st. That they feel that that there's an issue at play that could risk continuity of supply. It becomes a date-driven exercise. They need to get at it. I'd also would suggest that in terms of having access to data, is that to be able to have a hearing of this nature, they have a multitude of data before them right now because they've just conducted a hearing. So there wouldn't be the same type of fiduciary responsibility to actually to table new evidence, given that they have good evidence that's current at the moment. The only discussion is that they would have to compel the sector to come forward to prove those costs. If the sector is reluctant to do that, is that this quasi-judicial entity has the ability to subpoena the sector as well, to compel them to prove what those costs are. So there's a multitude of tools that I'm going to suggest that the EUB has. It may not be within their standard time frame or that they would use. But that's the reason why we have a permanent regulatory body in this. You've got resident knowledge that's in place with subject matter experts to be able to get at a question such as this.
We're going to go to Brian Tate with Acadia Broadcasting.
Thanks. I'm curious if there's anything else being considered that would help lower gas prices. You talk about wanting to make gas as cheap as you can for New Brunswickers. Is there anything else in the works besides cutting this carbon adjuster?
Thanks for that question, Brian, because I think you're getting at the heart of it here is what are the things that we can do to help New Brunswickers who are trying really hard to make ends meet. So we've looked at a lot of different things, a lot of different ways that we might be able to reduce costs for New Brunswickers across a whole variety of expenses. You would have seen us already put a rent cap in place, put a property assessment freeze in place, take 10% off people's power bills, put a school breakfast program in place, make RSV vaccines free for seniors. So we are constantly looking for ways that we can make life more affordable, and we'll continue to do that. There's nothing imminent coming tomorrow in relation to specifically the price of gas, but we are constantly evaluating the tools and options, limited as they may be, that we have to help people, because look, the cost of living has been something that we hear about every day from New Brunswickers, and it hasn't gotten better over the last many weeks. Maybe the interest rate announcement, I don't know. It's tough out there. It's tough out there for folks, and we're trying to find ways to help, and this is one way that we can help make sure they're not paying too much for gas.
And I don't have a follow-up. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to David Gordon, coach of the New Brunswick Media Co-op.
Hi there. I just wanted to get a comment about another topic, that is TD Bank's planned closure of its call center in Dieppe. As you know, this was established with millions of dollars in government subsidies, supposedly intended for job creation. So far, the bank won't disclose to journalists even how many people are currently working there. So are you aware of how many job losses are expected, and any comment on this lack of transparency from the bank?
David, we can get the minister to follow up with you, the Minister of Opportunities New Brunswick, on that. We've been working with the employees and the bank to make sure that everybody is supported, so we'll get someone to follow up with you.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, avant de terminer, before we close, I'll turn it over to the Premier for final remarks. Dernier mot.
Thank you, Bruce. Merci tout le monde. I want to just reiterate the point here to the New Brunswickers that have been asking us for help, asking us to deliver on this promise, telling us that they don't understand why they're paying more than neighboring provinces, don't understand why they're paying for federal regulations that don't recognize the reality of New Brunswick. And so we have done our due diligence. We have worked through the process. We have given everyone time to be heard. And now we're acting to deliver on our commitment to you, to do everything we can to make life more affordable and take the cost of carbon adjustment off of the price of gas. And so we will continue to make sure that the EUB does their job to ensure that lowest possible cost of gas with a stable supply. Et on va continuer de vous écouter, de prendre des décisions responsables avec la considération pour ceux qui partagent les parties prenantes, l'industrie et les Néo-Brunswickois, qui nous disent à chaque tour qu'ils veulent voir cette promesse réalisée, qui veulent voir que ça leur coûte moins cher à la pompe de l'essence et que veulent voir un gouvernement qui travaille pour eux autres. Alors ça, c'est qu'est-ce que notre équipe fait. On travaille pour rendre la vie plus abordable pour les Néo-Brunswickois et les Néo-Brunswickoises. Nous sommes heureux de réaliser cette promesse aujourd'hui pour le 1er décembre pour enlever cette coût de carbone sur votre prix d'essence. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. That concludes today's news conference. Voilà ce qui met fin à notre conférence de presse. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you.